Are you ready to dive into JavaScript but don't know where to start? Today we're going to tackle 5 super simple JavaScript projects to kickstart your coding journey. So if you're ready, let's dive in. So to kick off these starter projects, we're going to create one of the simplest JavaScript examples there is, and that is the Hello World example. So to start off with, let's create a new file inside of Visual Studio Code. We do that by clicking on the plus button up here with a little document that says new file. I'm going to call that index.html. Once you've created that file, it should automatically open it for you on the right hand side. So to start off with, we're going to inject some simple HTML. So we're going to inject a HTML tag, and then inside of here, we're going to have the head. And then below that, we'll have the body tag. Now, when you add JavaScript to a file, you should always include the JavaScript to be the last thing that's rendered on the page. So we'd add it at the bottom here, for example. And that way, it actually allows all of the page to load prior to loading in the scripts. Because if we call JavaScript prior to the page actually loading, we won't be able to reference anything that's happening on the page. So I'm just going to remove these and take it back to the basics. So this is going to be one of the simplest examples. What we do is we open up a script tag. And this is telling the HTML file that we want to start using JavaScript. What we can do is we can either attach a file, as you can see here, src is equal to js/jquery, or we can just close this tag off and start injecting JavaScript directly onto the page. So in this example, we're going to use the alert method. And what this will do, it will allow us to show an alert message on the screen. So inside of this alert, we can have a string. So we enter that by having these 2 quotation marks, and that will tell JavaScript that whatever's inside of there is actually a string. And we've got the word hello world. So let's have a look at what this is doing. Let's right click on index.html over here, reveal in File Explorer, and let's double click this to open this up in Chrome. We can see that we have an alert box that shows here. And this is stopping actually anything else from loading on the page. We haven't actually got any content on there, but this will stop anything else from loading. And you can see it's still trying to load here. And if we click OK, that gets rid of the box for us. Up next, we have a simple tip calculator. So this is going to involve writing a little bit of HTML and then using the JavaScript to get different elements on the page and their values, and then doing some calculations and printing that value back out onto the page. So I'm just going to remove this alert message that we had before just to clean things up. And then above the opening script tag, I'm going to create a few new lines. And I'm going to create a new div. And this div is what's going to contain the HTML elements. So there's going to be 4 separate elements inside of here. So I'm going to create 4 separate divs. So to copy this line here, you can click on the left-hand side, do Control-C, and then press Control-V 4 times, and that will create 4 new elements for us inside of there. Now the first element we want to create is for the bill amount. And that's going to be an input. So we're going to create an input element here, and we're going to give that a type of number. And that will ensure that only numbers can be inserted into this box. And then the important part here is the ID. We want to give this an ID so that JavaScript is able to get the values from that box. And the ID we're going to give this is bill. Then we can close off that input field. Let's now go into the second div, and this is going to be the tip percentage. So we'll type tip and then percentage. And again, we'll create an input element, and that once again will have a type of number and an ID of tip percent. Now when you create IDs, it's always good to keep them in camel case and not have spaces in there. We use camel case to make it more easily readable, so you can tell the difference between the first word, the second word, and so on. Inside the third box, we're going to create a button element. So to do that, we create a button, and this will have an on-click event, and that's what's going to trigger our JavaScript. So on click, and that's going to trigger a function we're going to create in a second called calculate tip. And then we have this open and closed parentheses here. And once we've done that, we can then close this, and we can just give it the name that's going to be shown on the button, which will be calculate. And then finally, in the last box, we're going to have the tip amount. So tip amount. And that's going to have an empty span inside. So we create a span, and that will have an ID of tip amount. And this is going to be empty because what we're going to be doing is telling JavaScript that once we submit this function, it's going to do the math and then return the amount inside of this span. So let's now work on this calculate tip function. So let's go inside of our script tags that we have from before. I'm going to write the function key, and this will tell JavaScript that we're creating a brand new function. I'm going to create a function called calculate tip. And that will not take in any parameters. So we'll have this open and close parentheses here. Then we add some open and closed curly brackets. And everything that we want this function to do will go inside of those curly brackets. So let's start off with creating a few variables. So let, and then we're going to call this one bill. And what this is going to do is going to get the number that's been typed into this input field here. So to do that, we say document.getElement by ID. And we want to get the element that's called bill. And we want to get the value that's inside of there. So we say dot value. Let's do the same for the tip percentage. So let's create a let tip percentage. And that's going to be equal to document.getElementID, the tip percentage input field we have here. And then we're going to get the value from that field. So once we've got those two, we can actually calculate the tip amount. So we create a new variable called tip amount. And that's going to be equal to the bill times by, and then we have these brackets, and this is to calculate this prior to timesing it to that. So we have the tip percentage divided by 100 times by the bill. If the bill was £20 and the tip was 10%, we would do 10 divided by 100, which would give us a value of 0.1, and you times that by the bill, which would give you the actual percentage value. And then from here, we can say document.getElementById, the tip amount. So this last one we created, and we'll say the inner HTML is equal to this new tip amount. So let's hit save, right click on index.html again, reveal in File Explorer. Let's open this up, and we can see that we have this form here. So let's say the bill amount is 50, the tip is 10%. We click on calculate, we should get 5 back. So that's nice and simple. Let's make it a little bit harder. So 249.56. And then we're going to say the tip amount is a 4% tip. And we can calculate that and get that it's 9.9824. So let's close that window and come back into our HTML. And let's clear this out ready for the next piece of code. So up next, we're going to create a bit of script that is going to change the color of the background randomly using a button click. And this will change the background of the actual body of the page. So let's start off by creating that button. So as before, we say button, and that will have an onClick event. And that's going to trigger a change color function that we're going to create in a second. And then inside of there, we close that off and we say change color. And this is the content that will actually be on the button. So inside of our script tag, let's create that function. So function change color. And that's not going to take any parameters. And we open up and close our curly brackets. And then inside of here, we want to create a new variable. So we say let, and this is going to be the random color that we're going to get. So random color. And that's going to be equal to math.floor. So math.floor generates a number between 0 and 1. And then inside of the math.floor, we're going to say math.random. I'm going to open and close the brackets on that. And we're going to times this by a particular number, which is actually 256 to the power of 3. So that number is actually 16777,215. And then what we're going to do is we're going to convert the integer to a hexadecimal string. So to do this, we say .toString, and then we put in the number 16 inside of it, and that will convert that to a hexadecimal string for us. So once we've done that, we can say document.body, and that's going to target the document, so the actual HTML document. It's going to look at the body tag, and then we're going to add a style to that body tag. And that style that we want to convert is the background color. So we're going to then say that this background color will be equal to, And then we have this string here. So we open the string with the double quotes. We have a hash inside, close a string. And then what we're going to do is concatenate this with our random color. We do that by putting this plus button, and that allows us to have this string concatenated with this string. So once we've done that, we can click save. Let's right click on index.html over here, reveal in Finder. Let's double click, and we have our button at the top here. So I'm just going to zoom in. We click change color, and that will change the background color randomly. And we can do this as many times as we like. Up next, we're going to create a digital clock that displays the real time on the web page. This allows us to use the date constructor and get the hours, the minutes, and the seconds from that date constructor, and then print those out on the page. So let's clear out the information from before. And inside the body tag, I'm going to create just a small h1 tag. And that h1 tag is going to have an ID of clock. I'm just going to close it off. That's all the HTML we need for this one. Then inside the script tag, what we're going to do is we're going to create a function that's going to be called update time. We have the open and closed curly brackets. So now we need to create a few variables. The first one's going to be called now, and that's going to actually be getting the data from the date constructor. So to do that, we say new and then date, and this is going to allow us to get the date constructor, as you can see here. And then using that constructor, we can actually get the hours. So we say let h is equal to now.getHours. We can get the minutes by saying let m is equal to now.getMinutes. And we can also get the seconds by saying let s is equal to now.getSeconds. So once we have all of these variables, we can actually now print those out onto the page. So let's concatenate them all into a time string. So let time is equal to h plus, so we're concatenating with this string here. So we have a colon inside of a string. And then from here you can see we're concatenating 5 strings in total. So h, then another string with a colon inside, concatenate with the m, with another colon, and with the s. Then from here we can say document dot get element by ID. And then we're going to get that clock ID we set up earlier for the h1 tag. Then we can say inner text is equal to the time. So what that will do, that will inject this time variable inside of this clock ID here. So let's click save. And this isn't actually going to do anything. I'm going to open up the index.html and then tell you why it's not doing anything. So you can see here we actually just have a blank page, and if we inspect the elements, we can see inside of the elements we have this h1 tag with no information inside of it, and we have this function that we created. So let's close that down and go back and see why this isn't running. So this isn't running because we haven't actually called the update time function. So let's just call the update time function and see what happens then. So we've called update time. Let's open up the front end again. And we can see, oh, we have our time on the front end now, but it's not updating. To have it actually update, we need to wrap it inside of a set interval method. So let's create a set interval, and that's going to have the brackets. And inside of here, we want to have the update time. We want to update that time every 1000 milliseconds. So 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. And let's get rid of the update time at the bottom there. And we click save, and let's open up this again. And we can see that the time is now incrementing along with our clock. Now you may have noticed when we first opened it that the page was actually blank for a second. You can fix this by calling the update time function after the set interval. So we click save, reopen it, and you can see it appears immediately. The last piece of code we're going to look at is a random quote generator. So this will show us how to use arrays along with everything else we've learnt so far. So the math random, the math floor to get indexes, and also how to inject the elements onto the page. So let's clear the page back to how it was. So we've got a nice empty page. And at the top here, we're going to create a new div. And then we're going to create two separate divs inside of this. Now the first div is going to be a p tag. So that's a paragraph tag. And that will have the ID of quote. And that's just going to be an empty p tag. That's where we're going to inject our content into. Inside the second div tag, we're going to have a button. And this button will have an on-click event. And that on-click event will target a function called generate quote. Then we can close that button off and just say generate quote. So that's the HTML part done. Let's now jump into the JavaScript. So we need to create an array of the quotes that we want to call. So let's create a constant. So the difference between a constant, a variable, and a let is a constant can't actually be changed, whereas a let and a variable are able to be changed by the code. So this constant is going to be called quotes, and that's going to be equal to an array. We class an array using these square brackets, and then anything inside of here will be an element inside of that array. So that can be text elements, so we can have lots of text elements, or that could be objects. So object is defined by these curly brackets, but for now we're just going to have text elements. So the first text element we're going to have is hello world, and then we're going to have a comma, and that will say this is going to be a new element inside of the array. And then after that hello world, we're going to have a comma, and then we can have a new string in here, and that will be a new value inside of the array. So let's just enter some more text here. So how are you? Then another comma, to be or not to be. So I have 3 elements inside the array there. You can add as many as you like. So once we've added all of our values to that array, we can start creating the generate quote function. So let's write function generate quote. And then inside of this function, we want to create a variable called random index. And this random index is going to get a random number between 0 and the length of the array. So to do that, we say math.floor, then math.random, and then we want to times that by the quotes dot length. And quotes is the constant that we have here, and then we're going to get the length of that array. So it should be 1, 2, 3 in this example. Once we've done that, we want to show that element on the page. So we're going to say document dot get element by ID. And then we want to target the quote p tag that we had. So we say quote. And then the inner text is going to be equal to quotes with square brackets. This is going to say we want a particular index from this array. So this random index here, if that returns 0, it will get this first value here. If it returns 1, it will get this value here, and 2, it will get this value here. So arrays in JavaScript always start at 0. So let's click save, open up the front end again, and we can see we have our generate quote button here. So let's click that, and we can see it's printed out hello world. If we click it again, hello world, how are you, hello world, to be or not to be. So this is generating a random number and getting out the values from here. So because I've only got 3 values in there, it's more likely or not that we're going to get repeats. So there we go, we had 2 how are yous. It's more likely you're going to get repeat numbers. The more data you have in your array here, the less chance you are of getting those repeat numbers hitting. And there you have it. That's 5 basic JavaScript projects to get you onto the world of coding. Did you manage to complete all of them? Let me know in the comments. If you've got any questions or hit any roadblocks, please leave a comment. I'm here to help. If you found this video useful, click here to learn more about JavaScript. And also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to my channel. And I look forward to seeing how far you get on your journey. Thank you for watching.